A recent piece of news about Xu Hong's new book was reported to be removed from the shelves, has attracted attention. The first reaction of those who heard about it was to express their indignation at the suppression of freedom of speech, although they did not know what the report content was. I secretly wondered, are the Chinese authorities so vulnerable that they would remove the product as soon as it was reported? There must be more obvious problems. So, what exactly could be the problem? Observer.com reported this. Xu Hong said in a chat group that the reason for the removal was unscrupulous scholars complain. And some were worried about public opinion. Some netizens analyzed that the earliest empire probably involves some important conclusions of the Xia, Shang and Zhou chronology project. Xu is this the big boss of the project will be obsessed with Xia Chaochun's non-existent controversy by those with ulterior motives. He talks about the spiral truth in a long way but does not understand what it means. I didn't have the new book in hand, so I read the table of contents carefully, and as expected, I found something fishy in the third part of the book, unexplained chapter, in the difficult to solve the Yin ruins, new things, and the strong radiation of 3 high levels of centralization. Figure 2. With the help of my friend named Zhang, I found this book. After studying it in detail, although I had expected it, I was still shocked. Xu Hong, you are so cowardly. Ni Yuan in his new book, Xu Hong draws archaeological opinions based on the reborn, bronzes, jades, and pottery in the Yin ruins through citations. Yingshu culture was deeply influenced by archaeological and cultural factors in the northern region. Its depth and scope are rare. From a time point of view, whether the input or output of Yingshu culture was the most significant in the early stage of Yingshu culture, it can even be corresponding to the period of King Wu Ding of Shang dynasty. During the second phase of Yingshu culture, horse-drawn carriages and their accessories began to be rapidly popularized in Yingshu. Compared with the Shang dynasty, the political center of the Shang dynasty moved nearly 200 kilometers north and suddenly became closer. The distance from the groups in the north, northwest, has been reduced. The buffer zone has disappeared and war has become inevitable. Oracle bone documents record a large number of wars against the north, northwest, and it was under this situation. He Yuling 2020, Xu Hong New Book page 199. It mainly uses horse carriages as typical archaeological relics, and draws conclusions from large-scale space-time research by quoting a large number of different scholars: Lin Sinaifu, Wang Haichang, Zhang Zhengshang, Xia Hani, Stavrianos, Bagley, Guo Jingyun. Archaeological opinion: horse-drawn carriages originated from the west of the Central Plains, or from West Asia, Central Asia, the Eurasian steppe, or even Egypt. Pages 203 to 205 of Xu Hong's new book. Then, Xu Hong tried to see through things and see people through a large number of quotations, and came up with historical opinions. The rulers of the Xingan city site and the Yingshu royal family of the Yin and Shang dynasties cannot be regarded as the continuation of the same royal family. Nor should the two sites be regarded as successive capitals of the same dynasty. The centralized political system of the Yin and Shang dynasties and civilization. The content is very different from the civilization in the Central Plains before the Yin and Shang dynasties. But the inheritance relationship with the northeastern civilization is very clear, since the country with the Yin ruins as its capital calls itself Shang, and the city site before the Yin ruins in China. They are all very different from the Yin ruins, so they are not Shang. But various ancient countries before the founding of the Yin Shang dynasty. Guo Jingyun 2013, close hollow corner bracket, Xu Hong's new book, page 208. From this, we can conclude that the horse-taming people took over the Yin ruins? On the surface, it seems to be a question, but it is actually a statement. Oh my gosh! It is really audacious to deny China's large number of documentary records plus Chinese people's historical and cultural memory, based on archaeological relics plus archaeologists' analysis opinions. This reminds me of a passage in my article, Xu Hong must be transferred away from Erla too. Otherwise, the Shah dynasty will not get evidence. Archaeological discoveries only discover ancient ruins. Tombs, bottles and jars, animal and plant remains, etc. How to see through things and see people. How to explain. What is the explanation? This involves questions of interpretive theory. From the current point of view, there are three main explanation methods. First, the historical model. If there are historical records, of course, historical records are the most reliable explanation. And of course it has become the preferred explanation model. Second, the social anthropology model, where there are no historical records, it is a retreat. The second is to use social anthropology theory to explain it. The third is to make up the model. Only if you don't have the above two modes can you guess, make up, and tell stories. Just like Lun Furu, telling stories over and over again around a marble statue. Either explain it with the concepts of contemporary people or choose the historical model of a certain era to explain it. In layman's terms, it is time travel. Guangong fights Jin Chong. Pay attention to third, making up mode, guessing, telling stories. However, it is no wonder that the above analysis is made. After all, Guo Jingyun is not Chinese. This reminds me of a memory of Zhou Heng. In 1990, the International Seminar on Xia Culture was held in Los Angeles, USA. This was the first large-scale seminar on Xia culture held abroad. And Zhou Heng went to attend the seminar. According to Zhou Heng's recollection, domestic scholars were quite surprised when the conference began. The speeches they had originally prepared were all about which archaeological culture was the Xia culture. But the central topic of the conference was actually whether the Xia dynasty objectively existed. Zhou Heng concluded that the scholars at the meeting were divided into three groups. The first group held a negative attitude towards the Xia dynasty and believed that it was at best an era of myths and legends and could not be specifically referred to. Those who hold this opinion are almost all European and American scholars. The second group, they hold a positive attitude that the Xia dynasty existed objectively and cannot be denied. Those who hold this opinion are basically Chinese, including Taiwan and Hong Kong, or Chinese Americans with Chinese ancestry, etc. There is also a third faction. They either hold a neutral attitude, or do not express a position, neither affirming nor denying it. Those who hold this opinion are mainly Japanese scholars. There is such a strong connection between perspective and identity that even the most obtuse person would realize that the science of archaeology is hardly pure. Close black lens bracket, Lu Zhouyin. Looking for the Xia dynasty, Sanlian Life Weekly, issue 23, 2018, page 49. Criticism. Some people may say that no matter what his identity is, I will trust anyone who is scientific. In fact, whether in archaeological analysis or historical analysis, Xu Hong has a lot of problems, both in logic and evidence, which are not scientific at all. 1. About the origin of the Yin Shu royal family. In the mainstream discourse system of academic circles, so many new things appeared concentrated in the Yin ruins of Anyang. They were just new measures and new features within the dynasty after the capital of the Shang dynasty moved north from the Zhengluo area. Almost no one has heard about this. Objection was raised. The question here is, after only migrating less than 200 kilometers north, the cultural appearance is so different. If these huge changes are related to the meeting of merchants, and a certain Northern Root Army. Then what is the origin of the Northern Root Army? Is it a protagonist or a supporting role? These questions are worthy of further analysis. Page 200 of Xu Hong's new book. What was the reason why so many new things came about when the Shang dynasty moved north from the Zhongluo area to the Yin ruins? It's like asking, after the Ming dynasty moved its capital from Nanjing to Beijing, why did Beijing produce so many new things? There are many reasons for this. For example, the situation on the northern frontier was severe, and the main force and energy of the imperial court was focused on getting closer to the northern front line, and then gaining possible gains. There are more, and the territory may be expanded even wider. However, Xu Hong abruptly and paranoidly chose, what if, and then expressed that he cannot understand the reason for moving the capital from Zhongluo to Yingshu. Then, Xu Hong realized, seeing people through things through the following bizarre discussion, compared with the Erligong culture. The proportion of bronze weapons unearthed from tombs of the Yingshu culture has increased significantly, accounting for more than half of all bronzes, far exceeding ritual vessels, Zhang Weilian 2008. And the types of weapons unearthed cover weapons from the Central Plains and Northeast China characteristics. There are many types of grassland weapons. Judging from the unearthed weapons, there was a special aristocratic class dedicated to military affairs during the Yin and Shang dynasties. Before the Yin and Shang dynasties, there was no sign of the existence of such aristocrats. The grassland weapons should have passed through the Mongolian grasslands or Lake Baikal, Heilongjiang grassland area. Spread from northeast to China. Page 202 of Xu Hong's new book. The increase in the number of bronze weapons and the decrease in the number of ritual vessels was a very normal wartime policy of converting civilians into the army. However, Xu Hong thought it was not the case and excluded it without even considering it. He thought this showed that there was an army from the military aristocrats from the northeast occupied the Yin ruins, simply equating the relationship between artifacts and ethnic groups. In fact, there is more detailed research on the northern bronzes and their origins. In Yang Jianhua's related paper, the north is divided into the east zone and the west zone. And the east zone is divided into the north along the Great Wall and the Mongolian Plateau to Transbaikal. Yang Jianhua, Shao Weichu, the formation of the Metal Road in the Eastern Eurasian Steppe. Cultural Relics, Issue 06, 2017. The Taishi type in the northern part of the early Shang culture and the Shukaigo culture in northern China are important sources of northern bronzes. By the late Shang dynasty and the western Zhou dynasty, northern China, Mongolia and Transbaikal regions all entered a period of prosperity of bronze culture. The northern system bronzeware first spread from the south to the north of Yanshan, and then spread from the north of Yanshan to Mongolia and Transbaikal. The form evolved from vivid to dull or simplified. The time and space information of the bronze helmet reflects this route of spread. The earliest bronze in northern China helmets appeared at the Gaohong site in Liulan County at the end of the Shang dynasty and the beginning of the Zhou dynasty. This may have been influenced by the Central Plains style bronze helmets from the Yin ruins in the late Shang dynasty. This kind of bronze helmets flowed from the Yellow River in the south to the Baifu tombs in Changping south of Yanshan, then to the Upper Shajiadian culture north of Yanshan, and finally to the Mongolian plateau further north. This is a transmission route of northern bronzes in the Bronze Age that connects along the Great Wall to beyond the Great Wall and then to the Mongolian plateau. Northern China Mongolia during this period, the influence of the plateau metallurgical area even reached the Karasik culture in the Minasinsk Basin in the West Sian Mountains in the inland foothills of Asia. There are a small number of animal-headed knives and ring-headed knives, but their forms are duller and simpler than those in northern China, and they belong to the late stage. Shape. Cultural Relics, Issue 06, 2017, page 61. It can be seen that, firstly, the early Shang culture and Shukaigou culture were important sources of northern bronzes. Secondly, in the late Shang dynasty and the western Zhou dynasty, the spread direction of northern bronzes was from south to north, and the shapes of northern bronzes were dull and simplified. Obviously, we cannot necessarily conclude from this that the new military nobles from the north conquered the Yin ruins. On the contrary, it should be that the Yin ruins conquered the north and congratulated them from all over, bringing together cultures. 2. Generalize the concept of north. North refers to Shu Hong in a very broad sense, with a sense of pan, west, north, and even west, north to West Asia, Central Asia and the Eurasian steppes. This makes understanding and analysis problematic. After all, he wants to what is discussed is the Yin Shu royal family in a very specific time period. Although moving the capital from Zhongluo to Yin Shu closed the distance with the northern, northwest groups, Yin Shu is still in Henan, the Central Plains. Still far away from the half-moon zone in the north, and even further south of Beijing, the capital of the Yuan, Ming and Qing dynasties, 500 kilometers. This makes the rhetoric of Pan-North seem overblown and empty. It is worth noting that, judging from the logic of Shu Hong's discussion, the concept of Pan-North is derived from the specific artifacts of the Yin ruins, bronze, jade, pottery, carriages, etc. In other words, Shu Hong uses specific artifacts right-pointing arrow Pan-North, right-pointing arrow. The basic logical framework of Yin Shu royal family is used to complete the argument, which is obviously not rigorous. Therefore, we cannot use the term Pan-Northern to discuss the exchanges between Yinshu, Yanshan, and Mongolia in the early Yinshu period. We need to analyze the specific situation in detail. At the same time, the concept of time cannot be generalized. Three. Generalize the concept of time. Judging from Shu Hong's argument, his logic is to discuss the very narrow time period from Zhongluo to Yin Shu, equivalent to the instantaneous concept of physics, based on the current mainstream academic theory of Chinese bronze. Western theory about large time and space. There is no detailed analysis of specific issues, but mechanical application of Chinese bronze West, which is extremely imprecise. There are such serious problems in both evidence and logic. According to scientific thinking, as long as one step of reasoning is wrong, there is no need to look at the rest. However, Shu Hong used his unique liberal arts thinking, that is, by quoting the discussions of a large number of authoritative scholars, and trying to make up for the serious problems in logic and evidence by relying on his authority and numerical advantage. Which made me laugh. Based on what is said in this section, Shu Hong's argument is extremely imprecise, even very naive and ridiculous. Is this academic research? No, this is fooling people. Of course. There is another possibility, that is, Shu Hong was not familiar with the details of the frame veins of northern Chinese bronzes, and ended up deceiving himself. Shu Hong is renowned for his rigor in the academic world. I call Shu Hong's rigor harsh. However, Shu Hong applied this rigor to denying China's native origins and denying Chinese documentary records. On the contrary, in the face of Susan's broad, Western-speaking, Xu Hong praised it as an idea, and as a professional scholar, he would use evidence to confirm it. A netizen commented, however, Xu Hong has a soft spot for the westernization of Chinese civilization, and the history of ancient China is a history of huhua, even though the evidence and logic are obviously insufficient. What leads to Xu Hong's apparently contradictory rhetoric is his double standards, which are self-consistent with his adhering to a Western stance or succumbing to Western authority discourse. 4. The relationship between documents and archaeology. Xu Hong ignored a large amount of Chinese documents and based on extremely limited and one-sided archaeological data and Western rhetoric. Far-fetched and very imprecisely described the Yingshu dynasty as a dynasty established by the horse-taming people in China. Likewise, at Spiral Truth blithely dismisses a large body of literature. The Shang dynasty was about 3,600 to 3,000 years ago. Although the Zhou dynasty classics left many records of the Shang dynasty by the Zhou people, and the oracle bone inscriptions also recorded information about the sacrifices and divination of the Shang dynasty, this information is not as sufficient and trustworthy as that of later generations. Therefore, more and more in-depth records must be interpreted and deciphered from archaeological materials. Both Xu Hong and At Spiritual Truth despise early literary records. And at the same time they are obsessed with their own discussions, as Lu Zhouyan said. You advocate archaeology as its foundation, but you do not believe that archaeology should stop at the collection of materials. You should also use materials to explain history and use your imagination to tell stories. Regarding the story of Erla II is Sha culture, you have put forward quite harsh requirements, believing that it cannot be confirmed. Your own story is that Erla II is the earliest China, which is also controversial. There is no academic consensus. Why can there be different criteria for these two interpretations? Lu Zhouyan, Xu Hong. Without doubt, there is no contemporary knowledge. Sanlian Life Weekly, Issue 23. 2018. Why should I not trust the records of the ancients but trust today's analysis and interpretation of archaeological data? Today's people question the stance, motivations, emotions, and ideologies of the ancients. So, do modern people have no stance, motivations, emotions, and ideologies? Regarding historical documents and archaeological research, one can compare the suspect's confession and the police detective's analysis of the crime scene. This analogy is appropriate, as everyone knows when Hu Shi studied the Dream of Red Mansions. He often used Western judges to comment on cases. In short, human history is divided into two categories. One is recorded history, and the other is constructed history, history derived from research. These are two types of history that are completely different in nature. From the perspective of the Chinese concept of recorded history, Western constructed history is not history. From the perspective of the Western concept of constructed history, Chinese recorded history seems not scientific enough. But what is the nature of science? The essence of science is facts or the refining of facts or the explanation close to the facts. 5. The discourse of unification or colonization. In the 3.3 section of his new book, Xu Hong distorts the Shang dynasty's unification process of the Panlongsheng site in Hubei and interprets it as colonial aggression. This is obviously Xu Hong's narration based on the perspective of He Zun's concept of China, rather than based on the concept of today's China. Similarly, this is also based on the Western discourse system to explain Chinese history, rather than based on Chinese cultural concepts. In conclusion, I have been dealing with Xu Hong for many years. For Xu Hong, in a nutshell, the general point of view hidden under his agnostic philosophy is Chinese civilization is a Western view, a skeptical view of ancient history, a view of inner Asian history, and a history of self-abuse. View. The historical outlook determines what information Xu Hong accepts. Xu Hong's research model is not scientific and credible. The scientific method should be to master comprehensive information, synthesize information from all aspects, especially conflicting information, propose solutions to resolve conflicts, discover the truth hidden in contradictions, and draw explanations or conclusions that are close to the facts, without resorting to based on authority, number of people, communication power, and constant repetition. It creates a fait accompli that 3 people become a tiger and spread rumors. Going back to the news about Xu Hong's new book being taken off the shelves at the beginning of the article, given Xu Hong's status in the Chinese archaeological community today, there is no shortage of journals to publish papers. Therefore, this has nothing to do with freedom of speech, but about propaganda and brainwashing. There are indeed serious problems in Xu Hong's new book, and everyone is aware of them and punishing them. However, Xu Hong dares to write but dare not admit it. He falsely claims that unscrupulous scholars are complaining, and someone is worried about public opinion. It is true that there are indeed serious problems. Finally, Xu Hong said, the differences and the inferences from the perspective of comparative civilization history suggested by Professor Guo Jingyun are very important and enlightening. Unfortunately, the recent origin of the Yin-Sheng civilization she gave partly originated from the lower Shajiadian culture, etc., and distant origin, horse-taming people in the Asian grasslands, are insufficient. Especially the age of the archaeological remains in the northeast region as a recent source and the directionality of cultural transmission specified, which cannot support their views. Related issues will be discussed separately. Discussed in this article, therefore, this hypothesis still needs to be verified. Page 208 of Xu Hong's new book. Judging from this passage, Xu Hong appears to be using rhetoric skills that leave him room for sophistry. But in fact he neglects the important and takes the light. He mainly denies Guo Jingyun's discussion of the recent origin in the Northeast, but in fact tends to affirm the distant origin. His subtext is as follows: it is suspicious to say that Yingshu is a dynasty established by the Aryans in China. After all, Xu Hong knew that Yingshu had done a batch of genetic tests on human bones in 1997. In fact, what if we could make human bones from West Asia? The logical relationship between Shang Tomb's right-pointing arrow Shang clan right-pointing arrow nobles right-pointing arrow royal clan is complicated. It should be noted that there are also white nobles in the tombs of the Western Zhou dynasty. And there is also a branch of the Xiongnu who moved south to integrate. So, don't worry, Chinese, you have to be confident. Remaining remarks about Chinese bronze to the west. Chinese scholars have very little understanding of the specific situation of Western archaeology. In 2017, I asked Xu Hong to introduce books on the archaeology of Western Asia. But Xu Hong said he was unclear. In fact, if you pay attention, you will find that Western archaeological excavations and carbon-14 dating are very confusing. And they often propose a certain theory that is consistent with Western identity based on very limited data, such as Anderson's Chinese painted pottery West, and Chinese bronzes come to the West, such as the Andronovo cultural complex. Kong Dexon's doubts about the internal model of the Andronovo cultural complex based on new chronological data are strong. Although Kuzamina herself admitted that most Andronovo culture-related sites in Eurasia there are problems with the existing carbon-14 data. These data are seriously inconsistent with her relative age sequence, and the age range varies greatly. Although many scholars have expressed doubts about the simple line model proposed by Kuzamina, there have been objections to the communication model, but the model has been widely adopted. Kong Dexon, Jia Weiming, Adun Chaolu. New type of Bronze Age remains in the Western Tian Shan region. Western Regions Research, 2017 issue 04. In fact, I have systematically studied the Chinese Bronze Age system and found that the Ila-Tu culture, Shukaigo culture, Chija culture, Xinjiang Adanchaolu site and other Bronze Ages are actually almost the same, and there is no obvious ladder or clear transmission route. Analyzing the reasons for this dilemma, I think they are 1. Trapped in the bronze, eastward advance model created by the West, we dare not disobey it, dare not go a step beyond the bounds, and cater to it intentionally or unintentionally. 2. When selecting data, sometimes the high limit is used and sometimes the low limit is used. After all, bronze itself cannot be directly dated. 3. Data processing standards are different. For example, Bayesian formula is used in Ila-Tu but not elsewhere. I did not see it. For example, due to the influence and misleading of Western Southeast Asian bronze archaeology. It was not until 2011 that Li Kunsheng and Min Rui of the Archaeological Research Center of Yunnan University in China believed that the early Bronze Age of Yunnan was from the 17th century BC to the 11th century BC based on carbon-14 dating. Therefore, I assert that the excavation, collection, dating and data processing of bronze sites from Henan to Xinjiang must have been misled by the forged bronze eastward movement model by the West. Otherwise, it would be difficult to imagine the 3,000-year journey from Henan to Xinjiang in China. Over a vast area of many kilometers, the Bronze Age system would have been as obscure as it is now. I have long argued that Western archaeology is pseudoscience. The carbon-14 dating errors of European millet, Southeast Asian bronze, and West Asian painted pottery are ridiculously large, showing that Western archaeological excavations are seriously chaotic, and early archaeological ideas and concepts are seriously wrong and completely lost. Academic value. In fact, the chronological systems of Western archaeology are all fabricated or carefully designed, and are not credible at all. Fujimura's new style of personal heroism exists systematically in the Western archaeological community. Therefore, the bronze westward-eastward advance model is if it is not credible. Please see my article, 8 Steps to Subvert the Western Archaeological System and Historical System, for details. Therefore, I suggest that the Chinese archaeological community completely abandons the Western model of bronze marching eastward, develops unified national excavation standards, data selection standards, data processing standards, etc., seeks truth from facts, remeasures the Bronze Age of various sites and artifacts in China, and first if we understand the Bronze Age system within China, and then proceed to study the Bronze Age system outside China, we will be able to clearly understand it at a glance, and thus determine the world's Bronze Age system and propagation model. The theory of the origin of bronze in China, Shaanxi Gansu,